Do you believe in your heart that these companies have any interest in putting real estate agents out of business? We paid you billions of dollars to do that. And now you're coming out with new offers that compete directly with the people that got you here in the first place. Do you think real estate agents have the right to be frustrated? Today, I have a very special guest with us. Celeste Starchild currently is the COO of a company called IGO, but she used to be, I think it was the vice president of sales and marketing at ListHub. Is that correct?
At one time I was, and I became the general manager for ListHub in the last 6 years of my tenure at Realtor.com before I departed Realtor.com last March.
Okay, so I guess I didn't realize you actually worked at Realtor.com as well.
I did. ListHub was acquired by Realtor.com, and I stayed on for a good number of years after in several capacities.
Got it. Very cool. So I want to thank you for coming on the show, because the story in which I want to unpack with you, hopefully today for the audience, which is all real estate agents, mortgage loan officers, home inspectors, is the story between really how did Zillow come to this place of, what a lot of real estate agents would believe, like taking over the real estate industry. It seems like there's this huge debate that the real estate agent community feels very threatened by companies like actually Zillow and Realtor.com, because the position that I think a lot of real estate agents take, Celeste, as you know, is, wait a minute, we gave you our data. Now you're turning around and creating products and services that go directly to the consumer that cut us out completely. How is that possible? So I want to kind of go back. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of debate right now? And then we'll go back in time and kind of unpack this a little bit.
Well, first of all, thank you, Brandon. Thank you for having me. And to anybody listening, hello and thank you. I think it's really an important question that you're asking. How did we get here? Because I think understanding the steps and the process and sort of, it was really going from point A to point B to point C to point D. And then you can kind of understand how it came to be that we are where we are today. But I think that one of the fundamental things that sort of conveys throughout all this, the historical stuff that we'll dig into that, and it's fun, and it's a trip down memory lane and all of that. But I think fundamentally through all of that, something to remember is that Zillow and others like Zillow have really stayed laser focused on the consumer with a relentless vision for creating consumer experiences that exceed and that meet and exceed their expectations, right? And I think that if Zillow was never able to do that, or if anybody else was never able to do that, it wouldn't be a conversation that we'd be happening. But we live in a time when consumers demand and expect extremely elegant, enjoyable digital experiences. Where their responses and the amount of information and data that they can consume is vast, and they have options, and they can get answers extremely quickly to their questions. And so it was always that drive that that really came from the consumer side that made all of this possible. And back when Zillow and Trulia and Oodle and Vast and all of these, some of the names that we don't hear as much of anymore, when all of the different portals proliferated in the sort of 2006 and 7 through maybe 2010 or whatever, there were dozens, possibly hundreds of them out there. And that's what they were focused on. And real estate agent and broker websites of the time were lagging sorely behind in providing that level of experience.
Absolutely. And I think that regardless of how the real estate agent broker community feels, I think everybody would agree with what you just said. Zillow, the Realtor.coms of the world, the Trulias of the world, I agree 100%. They looked at this huge segment of the marketplace, this consumer demand, and they filled a huge void that, to your point, consumers really, really sought after, that the real estate community was not able to provide. I guess before we do rewind the clocks, what is your position on specifically when you hear maybe that the real estate agent community has a challenge with, on one hand, hey, realtor.com as an example, because realtor.com just came out with a new product too that directly competes with realtors, and Zillow certainly was with their iBuyer program, and cutting out the real estate agent. Was there talks, like, do you believe in your heart that these companies have any interest in putting real estate agents out of business and removing them completely from the equation? Or do you think that's all myth, hype, and emotion from the real estate community?
I don't think any of these companies have that lens. No. I also don't think that that's just not the angle that they take, right? I think that these companies do something that the real estate community could really model and find themselves in a more, innovative approach to what they do every day. I think what large tech companies do is they really seek to understand consumer needs and think about them in different ways and in inventive ways, and think about them in terms of what is this individual trying to accomplish and what are ideas we have about helping them to accomplish that. That might go against the grain of the way things operate today. They're not afraid to do that. They have a lot of really smart people putting a lot of time into those things. And so, when I think about the real estate community, it would be really exciting to see the real estate community, coming together with that type of approach. And, think about iBuyers. There's no reason why the real estate community couldn't have come up with that idea.
Right.
There's nothing against realtors here. It really just has to do with meeting a need that consumers have to be able to, sell their homes quickly with some assurance. Really met a segment of the industry's needs to do that, and also facilitated a more expedient and sure buyer's experience on the other side of that. So you're just solving problems in new ways. That's all it is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because the conversation that I have almost daily, whether that be from agents that I coach or from my brokerage or just from the community, is, well, the position a lot of them take, Celeste, is like, okay, Celeste, I hear you, but at the same point, the only way these companies are able to provide this consumer experience is with the data that we gave you, so that you can come up with a solution that competes directly with the people that not only gave you the data, but actually funded your entire existence. Mm-hmm. So, like, that's the part that I'm curious to get your answer on, the lens in which maybe the tech space looks at that. Are they worried about that? Because that's the position of a lot of realtors, is like, wait, Zillow, realtor.com, you've been selling us leads because we gave you access to our data, right? Back in 2006, we're going to talk about that. And we paid you billions of dollars to do that, to sell our data right back to us. And now, because you have so much funding, you're coming out with new offers that compete directly with the people that got you here in the first place. What's your position on that? What's your opinion on that?
Well, this does really go back in time, because yeah. I think that there was a moment in time when the real estate industry did have a choice. They really did have a choice. And during that time, I was an executive at ListHub, and our position in the matter was that there should be a fair and balanced exchange of value between the content owners. And we looked at that as the real estate brokers, although the agents as agents of that brokerage, when you kind of get down to the fine print in the contracts. Sure. And so forth. And our position was, there's value to be provided, going both directions. And ultimately, the broker, we believed, and I believed, and I believe ListHub still does believe. I can't speak for Realtor. I should say that sure. Right out the gate. I don't speak for Realtor.com or for ListHub today. Absolutely. But if I had to hazard a guess, I would say they probably continue to believe that brokers are fundamentally the the ones who should and do have a choice as to whether to provide their content to any of the sites in the network. So, it really is, a choice. I think the challenge today is that the number of consumer eyeballs on these large portals and the demand from consumers who are listing their properties to be on those portals has sort of cornered brokers who may prefer not to work with those companies. It's really challenging for them to compete for listings if they don't participate. And so at this point, it's a bit of a different game.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So that's actually a really good place to segment and rewind the clocks, because you nailed it. This whole thing now, and you're right, the real estate brokerage agent community got ourselves here. And now the consumers are demanding that their homes be on these platforms. It's like, we don't even have a choice anymore. Really, yes, you're right. We do have a choice on where to syndicate the listings, but really the consumers are driving this so much so that if you list a property and you make a business decision not to put that on Zillow, I'm not going to deal with realtor.com, I'm not going to deal with any of these platforms, well, it's going to be tough for you to convince a seller to do business with you. So that's really why I wanted to have you on the show, was to go back for realtors, Celeste, to understand how that came to be, the data, specifically how the broker community, when you guys were building List Hub, because from my understanding, the agreement in the beginning was with companies like List Hub. It wasn't direct to Zillow. Is that correct?
Brokers typically in the beginning didn't have direct contracts with those portals. No.
Okay.
I think, we'll set the clock in around, let's say 2006. And that was the year the bubble burst. So the market, the industry was in absolute turmoil. And coincidentally, that was the same time when List Hub launched, and the same time when these portals started to proliferate. And the economics of advertising on these portals was so inexpensive for brokers and agents suddenly, who were, struggling with this, the downturn of the market, and everybody's trying to conserve cash and wondering, oh no, how long is this going to last? How are we going to make it through? And the primary form of advertising at the time was newspapers. I mean, the expense of the print advertising and magazines and ads was such a burden on companies that, this was exactly the right moment. There was a vacuum that was created for these portals where suddenly the opportunity to advertise your listings across tons of different websites at no cost was the perfect replacement and the perfect story to tell a seller who wanted to know, how are you going to advertise my listings? And sure was a much more inexpensive alternative. And so, they really rushed to these portals as an inexpensive, option. So that's really, I think, understanding the backdrop rather of, what the market conditions were like at the time. It was really optimal for the portals to be out there.
Got it. All right. So that's really as I started to kind of dig into this whole story around what seems to be today, like real estate community versus these portals, the thing that people are missing is what you're talking about right now, which is why I want to have you on the podcast. It was really the real estate agent community seeking out alternatives to provide more value in a more cost-efficient way to serve our sellers. And in one way, we're the ones that kind of sought this out. To your point earlier, we didn't build the technology. It was companies there were other companies that were providing this need for at that time, the real estate brokerage community. Is that right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's the really key distinction is we can have this conversation in 2022 and realtors can be mad, but the truth is, and we kind of touched on it in the beginning of the show, nothing against our industry, but the reality was we could have created this a long time ago. We could have had portals and syndicated our listings and done all of that. The fact of the matter is we didn't. We were using print advertising that was very, very expensive. And then a company like List Hub comes along and says, hey, brokers, here's what we can do for your listings. And the brokers are like, that's a no-brainer for us. Is that kind of how it worked?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We did put in place some pretty stringent rules, like I was talking about the value exchange between the brokers and the portals. Simple things like if you submit your listings to the portals through List Hub, you know, the intellectual property, if you will, doesn't translate to, you're not in effect granting those portals the rights to use the description and the pictures on their sites in perpetuity. It doesn't become their property, which is what many of them had, you know, terms and conditions that would state that. Other things like that, you know, there were certain things that we required around the display of brokerage information and listing agent information on the listings. In many cases, that didn't exist on these portals, but we enforced that as a rule to be able to receive listings through the network. So we put some basic frameworks in place to sort of govern that value exchange to some degree. And that becomes important later in the story. But yeah, that was definitely the broker's choice, and like I said, always has been, except for that, you know, practically speaking, it's not anymore.
Right, exactly. Back then, when that first started to take place, where brokers started to work with companies like List Hub, was there any voice of concern from the brokers at that time, like in 2006, of like, what are you going to do with this information? And to your point, I know there's a lot of contracts that were supposed to protect the IP. Were brokers bringing up concerns back then, or had they not thought about any unintended consequences back then?
You know, I didn't hear a lot of those specific concerns. One thing that I heard about was related to one of the predominant portals of the time, and if not the first, one of the first portals on the List Hub network was, and this is a blast from the past, Google Base. So if you remember Google Base, you know, that's basically, for those people who don't know, just, you know, Google's classified section.
Sure.
Right. And just listings, that's all it was. And they had tons of categories. You could buy, you know, baby stuff or athletic equipment or houses, right?
Yeah.
And people freaked out about that a little bit. And I think it was just the name Google. It was that, you know, oh my gosh, Google is coming into real estate concept, less than it was about, hey, you know, what are they going to build that they're going to try to monetize on our backs, or, you know, anything related to the IP of, you know, the content, et cetera. It was really just more like, what are they doing?
Yeah, for sure.
They're so big, they're so powerful, they have so much money. Are they entering into real estate, and, you know, in effect? So, you know, I think that was probably the biggest thing I remember.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And then when you fast forward just a little bit from that point, List Hub and Zillow, then from my memory and my research, had call it a falling out, where their partnership dissipated. Can you kind of speak to what happened there and what was the result of that?
Sure. So let's see. We were at a renewal point between List Hub and Zillow. And at some point during the negotiation, Zillow announced that they were not going to renew, in effect. And it was a bit of a moment in time for the industry to make a decision, because I don't recall the exact number of listings that we were providing to them at the time, but suffice to say, it was significant.
Yeah.
And the industry really had a limited number of months. They did not have years, it was months to create new pathways to provide their listings to Zillow should they choose. Now, this is where, you know, you want to make sure you recognize in a conversation like this, had all the brokers gotten together into a room to talk about what they were going to do together, then that would have been anti-competitive, and yeah, there could have been some, you know, collusion challenges with that. So I am not suggesting that it could have done that or should have done that, or that anybody did that. However, if each individual brokerage had decided for themselves, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't really like where this Zillow thing is going, and I don't want to put my listings on there. And now that List Hub is going away as, the primary source of listings to this portal, I'm going to place my bets and I'm going to, opt out.
Yeah.
Nobody did it.
Nobody did it. Nobody did it.
it.
So what was the position that Zillow took where they didn't want to renew their contract with ListHub? Was it because at that moment maybe they wanted to go to the brokers direct? Was that, and not go through ListHub? Is that kind of the deal?
Yep, we were owned by Realtor.com by then, and I suspect that probably had there was probably concern by them about that positioning. When you receive your content in effect through your largest competitor, that probably raises some questions. So, for what it's worth, I think the relationship could have gone on for, who knows how much longer. And, I know from the position that I held as general manager of List Hub at the time, we had no intentions of, pulling the plug or doing anything different than what we had been doing, other than to evolve the platform with responses from all of our constituents.
Yeah, that makes sense now looking at that. And, I guess the thing that I'm curious to find out from all of your experience in this entire story, do you think real estate agents have the right to be frustrated? Do you think they have the right to feel as though these companies are turning against them and trying to put them out of business? Or do you think that's completely off base? Like, I'm curious to get your opinion.
But so I guess they could feel that way. I might look at it differently, which is more like, why? We can spend our time kind of, regretting things of the past, or we can, look ahead and really think about the best ways to adapt and to create our own futures as business people. And I think that, we all have, similar opportunities to be innovative and inventive and to solve needs and to serve consumers. And that's all we're trying to do. And so, I think it's exciting to see, small companies even sometimes doing really great, really inventive, really unusual things when those things are designed to meet a need or a unique need in the marketplace. So, could they, should they, does it matter?
Right, that's true.
Is it helpful to anybody? I mean, look, they're not going away. They created a better mousetrap. So now what? And so, look, a lot of companies, since the time when you could say, and I don't know when you'd mark the date that this happened, but there became a point when pretty much everybody used the internet to search for houses, and mostly these large portals. And some of them were brokerage, website, type national sort of, world-class experiences. And some of them were more sort of the third-party tech company Zillows of the world. But nevertheless, everybody uses, really nice, search experiences online today or on mobile.
For sure.
So a lot of companies just started saying, all right, fine then. I am going to buy a crap ton of leads from these companies. I'm going to put in, inside salespeople in my office. I'm going to staff up. I'm going to buy some software that makes it really, really smart about who to follow up with and when to follow up with those buyer leads that I'm purchasing. And I saw it firsthand. People got very wealthy doing that, and maybe they're still doing it today. They probably are. So, and so some people are saying, well, maybe that's not your style. But this is where just, the ability to adapt can be so powerful. And again, just kind of getting back to like, what is the purpose that you serve every day when, you get up, you look in the mirror and you go to work, whether you go down the hall to work or whether you go to an office to work or whether you go in your car, what are you there to do? And if it is to, build success for yourself through serving the needs of people who want to be homeowners, then you can do that so many different ways. And I think it's more interesting to talk about how to thrive in this world than to carry resentment about how things have gone down.
Yeah, and that's a great way to look at it. Quite frankly, I think that, it comes down to, I don't know the exact numbers, but Zillow, I think their revenue, 80 to 90% of the revenue still comes from, selling leads to realtors. The vast majority of their revenue comes through this channel. And they come out, Celeste, and make public announcements and say, we're never going to get into brokerage business. Oh, just kidding. We're going to get in the brokerage business. We're never going to compete with realtors. Oh, just kidding. We're going to compete directly with realtors. We're never going to get in the mortgage business. Just kidding. And so it just seems as though this is where the narrative, it just seems, and we could be completely off base. The real estate industry can be off base, but based on Zillow's actions, it appears that what they say and what they do are completely out of alignment. And this is, I think, where the concern comes from. And so I think that's where the agent's concerns really come from, if that makes sense.
Totally understandable. I think that, I've seen the difference between what they've said and what they've done at different points in time. Remember, the game that they're playing is not, I'm building a trusting relationship with you.
True.
The game that they're playing is, I want to deliver the next generation of consumer experiences to consumers, and I want to win by doing that.
Do you think that they're so well funded at this point that they're now, the decisions they've made, let's just say over the last 5 years, not that they're totally disregarding their actual consumer, which is realtors. This is the biggest, I think, myth of the world, in my opinion, is that the everyday consumer thinks Zillow serves them, which that might be their North Star. This is what they keep saying in all of their shareholder meetings. But the reality is their actual customer that's giving them money is the real estate agent. Do you think when they make decisions like, hey, we're going to come out with something that directly competes with the people that are giving us money, that we're so well funded at this point that we're okay taking those risks now that maybe we weren't able to take in the past? Or do you think that's completely off guard as well?
I think their ability to take risks has to do with the fact that they have leverage through those consumer eyeballs.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
that's what it is that, and until what amount of competition or pain, let's just say pain.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, what do you think? What amount of pain would a broker need to feel to say, that's it, I'm not putting listings there? Because that's really the biggest threat. Now, it's all moot now with Zillow in particular, because Zillow is a brokerage and they don't get their listings direct from brokers. It's not that opt-in, opt-out game that it used to be with syndication anymore. So it is moot, but I guess, it is an interesting rhetorical question. What would it take for you to say, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to run, a thriving real estate business without telling my sellers I'm putting their listings on the portal, right?
No, that's a great point. And so for those that aren't aware, just go back to what you were just saying, that the whole opting in or out is gone, that Zillow is just getting a direct feed. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. So every broker and agent, is aware that as a member of multiple listing service in, whatever local geography you're located, you have access to IDX. And IDX is a set of business rules that basically says, if you're a broker and you opt into IDX, that means that the listings that your office or your company has can be included and displayed on the websites of all of the competing agents and brokers in your market. And in turn, you receive the benefit of being able to access all of the listings within the MLS database to display on your website. So it's a really successful program that I think was really smart when it was created. And it just says, look, we're all going to share, it benefits. And I think it has benefited the industry to be able to, share those in turn and have the opportunity to build a great consumer experience on your website. So that's IDX. Now, when Zillow became a broker and basically obtained a brokerage license, and I don't know, I'm assuming it might be all states.
I would assume that too, right? And then, yeah.
then suddenly they were entitled as a brokerage to be a member of the multiple listing service and to receive the IDX feed, just like a broker. So they don't have to get syndication anymore. Now, if you're a broker and you don't want your listings on Zillow, your only option really is to say, I won't provide my listings to IDX.
Wow, that's a great point.
Which means I won't get the IDX feed myself and I won't have listings on my website.
That's like the checkmate. That's like Zillow's checkmate. And that's a really good point that you bring up. It's like, it's over now. I mean, we're a brokerage. We're getting the same information you're getting. We just put it on our website called Zillow.com. What website are you putting your listings on? So
you got it.
That's so interesting. So where do we go? Where do you think the industry is going now? What do you think is in store for the future of the real estate industry?
It's a great question. I mean, there's so many exciting things that I think have gotten past the stage of like, wow, that's a new idea. I wonder if it will work. And now we know that, that some of these new models have legs. I mean, iBuyer is one of them. I don't think it's for everyone, but I think it's a model that's here to stay.
Yeah.
And so, maybe, just maybe, the real estate community can, and I've seen some franchises do some interesting things in this space. So we are seeing it happen where, all right, so, Open Door and Zillow, have kind of proven how it can go right and how it can go wrong. And, we sort of see how it all works a little bit. It's not super risky anymore. We know there's a segment of the market that's going to do it. So now how's real estate going to do it better?
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. Or, we're seeing some interesting, these models where, investors buying homes and in effect, buying entire neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
And doing sort of a hybrid ownership rental, you sort of pay a fee to have your home maintained and you own a share of something. And so there's all these really interesting models out there that I think, it'd just be interesting to see how the real estate community would bring what they know about, nobody knows better kind of the human heart as it relates to, home and transacting and moving and choosing and making those decisions. And I think that, to sort of look at some of these models and, what happens to those if you apply that expertise of the real estate community. I think it could be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it will be interesting to see because you're right. I mean, the real estate industry, I think, is at a crossroads. Like they have to innovate. They have to adapt. Because the other big thing, and I guess this will be a good place to end, is like there's all these antitrust lawsuits going on that are compressing real estate commissions, that are challenging the status quo on how real estate transactions have been done for decades. And it really comes down to how these judges rule in these cases that can alter the trajectory of the real estate industry, whether people like it or not. Do you have an opinion on real estate commissions and how real estate agents transact business? I'm sure we would agree that they have to start providing more value to the consumer. Would you agree?
I do. And I think too, just sort of, I think consumers really are looking for surety. They're looking for assurance. And they can either get that because they have a trusted professional that is guiding them, or they can get it because, they're transacting through something like Knock or an iBuyer program where everything is on paper and everything is, kind of clean cut. There are fewer uncertainties related in that whole journey. So, that might be something that I would suggest is, think about ways to, to provide that level of assurance in new ways. And, I think this might be an area where maybe some of the either groups of independents working together, whether that's through like leading real estate companies of the world, groups like that, or franchise groups, et cetera, may have sort of that collective kind of muscle to be able to put together kind of bigger programs to bring those types of things to individual agents as the industry does change.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's just so interesting, as to how this whole thing is turning out. And to your point, it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. And so, thank you so much for providing all this great insight to the real estate agent community, because I think a lot of people have learned a lot of different things. Is there anything else that you think maybe we should have talked about that we missed?
Brandon, we covered a lot, and it was really fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. So thank you so much for reaching out and for having me. And, the only thing I would say is, what I'm doing right now is quite interesting in that it feels like I have stepped into real estate 2005 is kind of what I feel like, because the inspection industry is on the precipice of a similar technology reinvention.
Yeah, great point.
In my opinion. And because it's a little bit smaller industry, it's taken a little bit longer, very fragmented industry, and that lots of independent operators out there. So, but it is coming. And so I'm, enjoying starting again in a place where maybe we can take another crack at this, right?
That would be great. Let's get you back on the show. Let's talk about the inspection industry. Let's talk about IGO. So Celeste, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care.